Good afternoon. I would like to call the February 13th, 2024 meeting of the Environment Committee to order, and unfortunately, we do not have a quorum, so we can't do the minutes and we can't do the consent agenda. We have nothing on the non-consent agenda, which puts us right into the information item. Just whipping through the agenda quickly today.
Until it gets to archive.
Yeah. So the water policy plan update.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. As promised, we're here. Well, I'm here. Steve will be coming up here soon. Again, to walk through some water policies that we wanted to discuss with you. I'll get your thoughts and hopefully incorporate your feedback as we continue the sausage making. You've seen this, you know, the plan, the purpose is to make sure that we have sustainable waters in our region. This is going to be the really fast version. We know that we are working together to have an integrated plan with our colleagues from the other policy plans and making sure that we have shared regional goals, visions, and values. So this plan is connected with all of that other work that you might be hearing in other committees or council meetings. The one thing that has changed since we last spoke, and I promised I would give you some updates on the big changes. So originally we started with 6 objectives for the water policy plan. And through conversation with our external stakeholders and external advisory groups, it came to be that we had some redundancies in the objectives themselves. The first big one that we switched out was we removed water sustainability as an objective because frankly, if we do all of these other things on the slide, we will achieve water sustainability. And so that's where it sort of became too much of an objective and everything could fit into it. And if we say it's everything, that means that there's a potential for it to be nothing. So we are going to continue to talk about water sustainability in our plan. We're trying to figure out the semantics. I think at this point I'm calling it the ultimate goal. We'll figure out what we're gonna call it, but water sustainability, like I said, is at the heart of this plan, but it doesn't have to be the objective. The other change that we made, we used to have one objective specifically for infrastructure and one objective specifically for investments. And we found ourselves tripping over those 2 topic areas because there is so much overlap. Yeah,
that's really good.
And so we decided that we can acknowledge that infrastructure is a type of investment that we make in the region. And we also make other investments, whether it's programmatic or other financial investments as we're thinking about water in the region. And so we decided to stick with investments, but definitely make sure that we are talking about infrastructure as a type of investment. So that means we are making this hopefully a quicker read when people come to the plan. We're making it a little bit more focused, more concise. So we now have 4 objectives. It is climate, investment, health, and equity. So that's where we are right now. I'm gonna pause if there's any questions, I guess.
I just think Madam Chair, I think it's a really good idea. So really appreciate the effort, and that's why being able to put these out and let them sit, I can see that there's a lot of pondering going on of like, it's just not clicking, you know? And so by letting it sit and talking about it, you can see things get pulled together. So I appreciate the time you're putting into it and giving that time to settle where things get redistributed and come out with a more focused, and 4 is easier to remember than 6 as well.
Madam Chair,
So-
Councilmember, thank you.
Yeah, I'm good with it, you know, if stuff doesn't work, changing is a good way to deal with that, so thank you. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I agree because typically, I mean, I've seen it, you can create something you think is the best thing in the world. But if it is the best thing in the world, you let it rest. And it's like good bread, you let it rest and you can go back to it with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
And because sometimes we become too attracted to our own ideas. And that's why you need a good group and you need time.
Thank you, council members.
Go ahead.
One more comment, Madam Chair. So I'm on the Regional Development Work Group Committee as well. And you know, they've got a whole slide on drivers that are driving it, and water is one of the drivers in such a big change and improvements from 2040 to actually what are the drivers that are going to be, may change and impact the development, and to put them up front and to note environmental, water is going to be one of the issues, and there's a few more, but it, you know, when I first started, this is kind of the feedback loop I had wanted to see, and I'm really pleased because I know I just stopped in at Lisa's office, and I know that you guys are talking a lot about including these and making these, you know, circular as well. So I wanted to just say I appreciate that too.
Yeah, Madam Chair, council members, I actually ended up having to step out of an integration team meeting to help make sure that we were going to get started on time. So we're definitely having those conversations and thinking about even at the objective and policy level where there is overlap. We want to make sure that we're not creating redundancies in our various policy plans because this is one giant package as the regional development guide. But we did have a really good conversation today to say, yes, let's avoid redundancy, but we should also reinforce and support where our plans do overlap and make sure that we have the right structure. And so there's been a lot of conversation that's been really great this time through. All right. This is just a reminder of the template that you will be seeing. We have a whole bunch of really big tables printed out so that we can draw with Sharpies on them. In general, when you come to this template, there is going to be the topic area at the top. There's a little bit of narrative language that sets the context for why this policy exists. And all of this is in the document that we sent attached to this. At the top of the table, we will have the policy language and the desired outcomes. And that's where I'm hoping we can just take a beat and pause and focus on those, even though I know we want to get to the actions. We want to think about how this actually will work in the metro. But let's have a conversation first off if this policy makes sense and if those desired outcomes really do encapsulate what the regional outcomes we would want for this specific policy area. And then we get into the fun part of thinking about the example actions that we want to list. And ES has taken the lead and actually set this pattern for many different policy plans in which when we are talking about actions, we are thinking about them through our partnering potential, our planning potential, and then the services that we provide. So those are the different areas of actions. I do want to say
the template needs to be updated to have 4 little dots.
Thank you. I am actually saying that as well. Apparently I loved the logos so much, I just wanted to keep them around. The one thing I do also want to say, and this is the inherent nature of humans, when you start seeing a bulleted list, you might have a fear that this is the exhaustive list and that there's a pressure for us to make sure that we have all of these actions in place. I want to make sure that the most important ones definitely make this plan. The ones that we know we are going to be taking action on in the next 2 to 5 years, because the other part of this is that there's an opportunity to amend the plan and update those bullets. So I don't want us stressing about the next 10 years or potentially 30 years of what we need to come up with actions. Let's not give ourselves that much heartache. We can start with smaller chunks when we're thinking about these actions. And it's not just actions for us, it would be actions for the whole region as well. So, draft policies topic. So last time through, we took the Band-Aid off with just one topic. We discussed the integrated water policy. If you have any comments on that, if you missed the discussion, please do feel free to pass those comments on to me. We will gladly take them as part of the authoring team. Today, we are going to be discussing the water equity, the water monitoring, data and assessment, the climate adaptation and mitigation, the water and land use, and then lastly, the water reuse policies. And then again, there's the promise that there are more policies to come. We just don't want to spend your whole evening discussing policies, just half of it. So with that, when we do break out into our single breakout, we will be asking you these questions. First off, what are your first impressions about the policy and the outcomes? Are we on the right path? Should we think about modifying the language? And then lastly, we will jump to those actions, and then we'll talk about whether we missed anything important that you think should be on that list. So Madam Chair, with that, I'll pause if there's any questions, but I'm excited to get going.
Okay. Let's go.
All right. I was gonna say we can come up here. It's
Wherever you wanna go is fine, I don't care.
So I guess we
I
got to-
think we're gonna go here.
I'll go sit by side.
I'm sorry.
I didn't know we were gonna be doing
You gotta put your brain power in it.
And we're gonna put you to work today.
this. I would have done some homework.
Do you want to? Alright.
So do we have any, I wish we had like some comps, like, I know like the Finger Lake region is very similar to our region. So they probably have some of the similar concerns that we have, and have we ever taken a look at that region? Because of what they're doing?
Generally, we do stay a little bit more in the upper Midwest.
Okay,
But specifically for chlorides, the Finger Lakes and Vermont are leading policy to try and address chloride management. So like if you think about the northern tier, we all have that same problem.
We all have snow and ice.
Exactly. And so there are times, and it's actually through our work and the continued policy research that we did before this, that we started looking at those different regions and thinking about how their potential actions could work for ours. So we did take our first blush run at it. I would say we could always look a little bit harder and just see what the specific policy language they have as well. That's a good suggestion. So this water policy, and I'm glad Gail was just pulling up to the table because y'all get to mark it up. It's not going to be me writing upside down this time. This is why I'm standing on this side. So the equitable water outcomes policy, the way that we have it currently written is that regional water benefits and water services are accessible and shared amongst all residents and communities. The desired outcomes are that all residents have access to safe and affordable water for drinking, recreation, cultural, and other social or commercial uses. The public and ecosystem health benefits of abundant and clean natural waters and water service providers are fully realized in all communities in the region. Water service and benefit gaps are prioritized and addressed in vulnerable populations and communities. And then lastly, historically underrepresented and overburdened populations are involved with water planning, conservations, and decisions. Let's stop there and get your thoughts on the policy and the outcomes.
What does benefit gaps mean?
If we are having some communities that are gaining more benefits from a water service than others, that would be a benefit gap between those two different communities.
So other than
Like what?
Like what? So other than money, what cost? What would be a benefit gap? I'm just gonna make a note.
Yeah, please put that there and we can investigate.
You don't know what that,
I think the part is, so if you haven't, well, I was told not money, so I was trying to come up with a different one on the spot. My go-to is like if you have a lower household income and you are paying for water services, it is more of a burden, and so that burden gap between customers who have more means to pay for water. So that would be the first one, is that there would be a benefit gap between affluent families and families with lower income for paying for water services. I will continue to
Think about that.
others as
Yeah,
others.
yeah. Prioritize interest.
yeah, because I mean, like even on the next one, historically underrepresented and overburdened populations. Okay, so we have people with lead service lines would be one. People who have private wells are sometimes considered one.
I think the other part, and this is just coming to normal barriers of thinking about governance across the board is that making sure that we are hearing those voices as we're developing policy itself. And so making sure that we are creating those on-ramps as we are thinking about different water policies. And like the Water Values Project was the one first take at trying to get that different data that we normally don't use when assessing it. So that would be making sure that that information is being involved and included with water planning conversations.
Well, and I think,
So it's not just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, we had talked about the value of water and how that is different for different people, and is that part of equity? Of
Absolutely.
understanding how the value of water is gonna be different, so it's not that they have access, but that, I don't know how that gets put in there, but that's part of the equity, is different communities, overburdened, historically underrepresented, more money, less money, whatever, they value water differently and
Yeah, I
the
think there's
social
a
value
component
of
to
water,
this.
so I don't know how, if that's needs to be explicitly put in.
Culturally responsive social value.
Because it was, somebody did explain to me, and it's, so you may have, so I know the tiers for using water and all of that. But a lot of seniors like to garden, so they use more value. The value to them is to garden, maybe have a nice lawn or something. I wouldn't value that, but to them, that's their hobby, that's their interest, that's their neighborhood, so to them, they value that a lot. So who am I to say when I
That
value?
you can't value that, yeah.
But I value recreation and clean lakes and having a
Right.
boat ramp. So I can go fishing and get on the lake. So it seems to me that that's part of the equity.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's a little bit of, first off, just having the acknowledgement that we all don't have the same relationship or value system when we are thinking about water. And so like making sure that we're just starting from that point. And then also making sure that, when we are thinking about who has historically put their opinions on how we manage our
Well,
water,
yes.
what values are now codified in our policies that perhaps don't represent
Right.
other community groups' values, and how can we think about some of this institutionalized lack of diversity in our thoughts, that we can start thinking a little bit with a different perspective of how we are creating our water policies.
I think some of it is access, because I noticed, rightly so, some areas, you'll see a lot of private docks, right? And, but when you look for public fishing piers in some areas they have them and they're very nice, but in some areas I noticed there are no public fishing piers. So that means if I'm a poor family and I wanna go fishing, I can't afford a boat and I can't afford an expensive house that would give me that, then I can't, but my family's still paying taxes out of what little money they have, then I can't go there and go fishing. Or I can't take my kids fishing, or, even for some people, fishing to eat, it even comes into play.
Absolutely.
So I noticed that because I started fishing in the past few years. So, but I go to public fishing piers on purpose because I want to see, because I could afford to rent a boat or buy a boat and all that, but I don't do that because I want to see would the poor family do? What is their access? And so I think that's part of equity,
I'm actually really pleased that when you saw the words water access, you thought about surface water access, because a lot of times when we see the word water access, we think about it from a water supply and whether or not, and this is again an equity issue, but if you have a water table that has been drawn down, depending on your ability to pay, you have to extend your well deeper to reach that water table. And people can't literally have the funds to access water anymore, depending on how their neighbors are using the water supply. And so that well interference issue, usually when people hear the word water access, that's what they think. And so you made me very happy, so thank you. I'm showing my bias
No, 'cause you
on
got
surface
things.
water.
I did have another question. Do we have a policy like on slant drilling? So if, like at some places, I'm not sure what the policy is in Minnesota. If there's a, on the water table, and if I wanna access it, you can just do a slant drill, you access it in a better way. If you have the money, or if you have a factory and you wanna access that water in a better way. What's the policy in Minnesota?
I'm not sure, I
I
can look
think
into that.
the DNR.
The
definitely.
DNR controls well permits, but I don't even know what a slant well is.
Well,
It's
it's
like-
like, well,
I
you
mean,
can,
I
you can
understand what
actually,
It's like a
slant
cheater
means.
but you
way.
can actually put in horizontals, which is what Texas tried to do to New Mexico. They tried to put in horizontals across the board. This was many years, oh yes, and I mean horizontal drilling for fracking, you can do lots of, I suspect for water supply wells, you have to do a construction permit to show,
Okay.
and I don't imagine, we can check, I don't imagine those are approved. Yeah.
But we can look into it, thank you, this will be an opportunity for us to
Yeah.
learn. All right,
So I don't know how we think about including that, but that would just be a comment on.
Do we have to finish this today?
We're just gonna go through them, walk through each one of these today.
we are gonna walk through
So
each
we
one
have
of
to.
these.
Yeah.
So I was actually looking at Steve, because I
Yeah.
forgot to
We
set a
have-
timer, so let's go.
About 6 more minutes.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, that's fine, so we got our main ones.
And Councilmember Carter, if you end up having that really great moment on your drive home, feel free to
Yeah,
email
I'm
us.
an in the cave kind of guy.
Yeah.
I'm the introvert. I don't know if I appear to be or not, but, so I do my best work in the cave.
Okay.
So when I'm home in the cave, then ideas just come out, but in public, my best ideas do not present themselves.
The next meeting when we do this, we'll just put you in a corner over by yourself.
Well, if I could access this and then work on it,
Yeah, you have access to
you're
the
gonna get a
Word.
better product from me.
Yeah, there's a Word document that you got as part of your
Right.
package, so feel free to mark that up.
But
and feel free to share
it
that
was
with us.
kind of backwards in the
Right, because the presentation
word
was
Nika
the words
disappeared.
and the present, if you click on presentation, you got the memo.
Yeah, normally the PowerPoint would be down here
And
and the memo would be up here. And I clicked it a couple times, I was like, did I click the wrong thing? And then I finally figured out they were backwards, so I read the memo that was in the presentation part and looked at the PowerPoint that was in the memo part, but that's why you didn't see that we already got that
Yeah.
stuff
I didn't-
to review. I still don't feel like we have a good handle on outcomes. It
Okay.
seems to me kind of tortured. I
Okay.
don't know why, but it just.
Yeah.
Well, so not looking at this, if I were to just ask you, Councilmember Wolf, what would be your desired outcome from a water equity policy? What would you say, just off the cuff?
That everybody's treated fairly with regard to water.
Thank you.
And I think for the most part, we try to do that. I mean, you were talking about access to fishing. I think we have better access to shoreline than a lot of urban spaces do.
Oh, I moved from New Jersey where every single inch was privately owned.
Yes.
You couldn't, the access here in Minnesota is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even compared.
And I think for the most part, most cities are trying to have the same level of infrastructure for water supply and all of that throughout their whole community. We don't have the wrong side of the tracks for infrastructure as much as some other places would have. I mean, there's some, historical things like Minneapolis trying to do their really, really old infrastructure, but overall, I think our system is pretty equitable.
Yeah, I think that there are some interesting, and this has come up with our water advisory group and in MOSAC and TAC. There are some just inherent tensions when we talk about equity and thinking about water, because we want to make sure that everyone has affordable drinking water, because I will say, as a personal belief, water should be a right. We have yet to really come to consensus like that at the government level. But that being said, we also need to maintain our systems to ensure we're delivering them. And that's an asset management question, that is, and so like we are inherently, there's a tension between these two topics. And so it's been interesting to explore these with.
Well, we have people who want it not to be affordable because they figure people will conserve more if it's not affordable.
Yeah.
Too, so there's that tension.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, coming back down to like, what is the true value of water? Yeah.
So have we identified, like, I know, for example, different communities, the access and use of water, especially when it comes to like recreation and fishing and even drinking, it's gonna be different. It's gonna be different in the Native community as opposed to the Hmong community. Those are two communities that I think of, because I know that in the Native community, there's the fishing rights issue, the netting, all those things. In the Hmong community, they fish a lot for subsistence. So are we having listening sessions, or I'm sure we have had listening sessions specifically to target individual communities to find out because the best way to come up with a good policy is not so much to come out of our heads as to find out what those communities see as a good policy.
I think this is a fantastic transition for me to say, the bullet point in the action below provide is, and this is what we're committing to, we have started to do more engagements. But Met Council staff will convene and listen to community members who have water equity and environmental justice concerns and/or water experiences. We will try to work together to alleviate imbalances that cause injustices and strengthen our relationship and build trust in our organization and water services we and our partner agencies or organizations provide. I think it really is starting with those conversations to hear how do our residents in the Metro view their, this sounds pretty more touchy-feely than probably anyone in ES has ever said this to you before, but like, how do we value our relationship with water? How do we really define what our relationship with water is? And is my relationship with water the same as yours? And how do we really think about that while not devaluing how you have your relationship? And so I think the other part that is, there's a connection here is Councilmember Morales brought it up at the last meeting, is also thinking about the people who have a lack of trust of our water supplies and how much money they might be spending on purchasing very expensive bottled water comparative to the price of tap.
Which frequently is just tap water in a bottle.
Exactly. And so I think that that's, again, another lens to be thinking about from a water equity problem or a water equity challenge that we have, is that, sometimes it's those more recently arrived members of our community who may not have the resources are spending more of their resources on water that they don't have to. And so there's a cultural and communication connection that we need to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I distill all my water that I drink. I have a distillation unit. Maybe I'm too much of a science person. I distill all
You
water.
really distill all water?
Yeah, I have a distillation unit. It's about this big. It's a huge unit, and it's in my kitchen, and everything I cook with and drink is distilled. So whatever's in there, I want it to be left behind. And
Okay.
so, but I think about, as a matter of fact, they just had a water crisis in Philadelphia a few months ago. My son called me because he wanted to purchase a unit. But I think about growing up. My father used to get the water from the creek. So it was a clean creek, hopefully. And he used to, because I used to have to go with him sometime and bring that water back, because we could not afford the bottled water that everybody had. But it was a creek that was supposedly tested periodically and certified, and we would go there and we'd get the water and bring it back. So, but we had a car, but when I was really little, we couldn't afford a car. So all those things, when I think about equity, and you think about clean water, and you think about, let's say the water's not clean, if it wasn't clean, could you afford a distillation unit if you afford poor family, likely not, you'd be boiling pots. And that's happened at different times in different cities. You know,
But it
So-
very rarely happens here.
no, I don't,
Blaine
no,
had
it didn't
a-
happen
Had
here,
a
but,
problem with their computers were so old and out of date that they ended up having to boil water for a little while because of a problem,
Yeah.
losing pressure, but otherwise, I mean, it gets checked all the time. The city
Yeah.
water is
Moving on to the next
continuing
one.
to
gonna say,
yeah,
we're
we
gonna-
have some of the
Okay.
cleanest
You
have
water
any
in the
thoughts
country.
though?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
again, I don't want to
No, but
exclude thoughts.
One thought that I had on there is in the effort to have cross connections between divisions, people always bring up transit access to regional parks or transit access to priority waters, and we've done studies in the past, and it's not something that people actually, when you go to people who don't have cars and say, would you like to have transit service to get to our regional park or to a lake? That's not a big impediment for them, that they really want us to, and typically you're taking some of the water you can get to on transit now, if you wanna go to the water in Minneapolis or St. Paul or anywhere along the transit routes, but in terms of extending it somewhere else, there isn't enough people that want to take a regular route to that aren't already going there by car.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, we keep throwing that out there to make people happy and think that we're thinking interdivisionally, but our research from, it was the Regional Parks Policy Plan maybe 10 years ago, the equity research showed that was not a big impediment for low income or people
I
of
mean, you
color.
just look at the load on the lakes in Minneapolis and
Yeah,
the parks and stuff, they're heavily used.
thank you, yeah, we'll take a look at that.
Okay.
The next policy that we're gonna be talking about is water monitoring, data and assessment. How do we make decisions if we don't understand the quality or quantity of our water? And that's where our data comes in. So the policy states natural waters and engineered water systems, so stormwater, water treatment and distribution systems, reuse systems, in the region are proactively monitored, high quality data is collected and shared, and conditions, thinking about the past, present, and future, are collaboratively assessed to support environmental and human health. The desired outcomes is that the region is a steward of water, understanding the current status of its waters, whether it's quantity or quality, to be prepared for the future. The council and regional partner organizations will monitor the region's surface water, groundwater, and wastewater to assess current conditions, trends, and to assure regulatory compliance. The council conducts studies and supports efforts to measure progress towards achieving sustainable, equitable water goals. And the council, in partnership with other organizations, uses its resources to support efforts to provide public health insights as the need arises.
So this is kind of like COVID.
Exactly, that might be the one that seems a little off, but that is our
You were
wastewater
brought in.
monitoring. Yeah, we
Right.
wanted to make sure that this was an all-encompassing thinking
Right.
about assessment.
So that's not so much an outcome as what we provide.
Thank you. Can you draw an arrow?
I'm just right provide.
I guess let's take a step back. Do you think this policy is worth having? Should we be committing to collecting, monitoring, and assessing data?
We're gonna do it anyway, whether we have a
Well, that's
policy or not.
right.
Right, we have to.
Well, I mean, if we don't do it, then who's picking it up?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
The other part that I will say, which I apologize that this is where like the document is constantly changing, so I was a little surprised. We did hear from our water advisory groups that they wanted to just make sure that we said in coordination with different
Yes.
agencies, so that is another part of
you
the
got your
outcome that we wanna
watershed,
make
your
sure.
advisor, you got,
Yeah.
they're all collecting data too, so
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's,
so don't duplicate and
I think
put
that's,
it all together.
right.
Exactly. So this is what happens when we have engagements like
Oh, I know,
Stagger
no, that's fine.
So yeah, all right, so our outcomes are that we have water, we have water data. We make sure we're collaborating with folks. We're assessing that to make sure that we are understanding what's happening with our waters. And then that we will support efforts to make sure that we will think about our systems from a public health perspective as well, so like COVID insights.
Yeah, I think that was one of the most important tools for monitoring during COVID, so I'm glad to see that there. And I think it gave nationally us a new perspective on that.
Yeah.
I mean,
So I invite you to now drift on down to the actions. A couple of the examples is that we will partner, assist, and support our collaborators with the monitoring and assessment of regional priority waters and groundwaters. If you remember about, a year or two ago or so, I'll say a year or so ago, my colleague Emily Restiger came through with her assessment to help identify what priority waters are. And so we're gonna make sure that we're bringing that information into the plan as well to help us prioritize and identify, because again, we are blessed with a lot of water to say that we're
Right, so here's
gonna
your
be.
planning
Well,
priorities.
and it's not just our job either. I mean, the locals have their own priorities.
Exactly.
And
So that's when we do say, when you see the terms priority waters, that is the connection back to that data set. We also are committing to collaboratively research and gather data, and this is also getting at the fact that we know there's people out there already collecting the data, so we just need to pull it together to tell stories that make sense for our region. We are also saying here that we will complete technical studies to understand regional and sub-regional long-term water supply availability. So this is where we're going to tie into some of the connections with the water supply plan. The Met Council will partner with public health agencies to remain aware in wastewater monitoring. So this is again, COVID is the example, but wastewater monitoring, there are some
Lots of
other
right.
things that we could be, if
I don't
the
wanna
Department of
turn
Health
into
needs
the
us.
poop police, but yeah, I understand.
That is the quote of today, so thank you. We always look for little like phrases,
Sound bites.
yeah, to pull out, and that's gonna be in the policy plan. Thank you, Councilmember Wolf.
We are the poop police.
Oh, I said I don't
Don't
want
want
to
to
be
be,
into,
yeah.
because we used to be the chair police with SAC.
Right, right.
And lastly, we'll just keep on moving on.
So is this stormwater infrastructure
Yes, yeah,
belong here, or is there a different policy that belongs under?
that is a good question.
So I'm not sure, as we get there, it just seems like stormwater, well, after we do, I guess, the data, an action would be to look at that. I
Yeah,
just don't know if that really just goes.
I would say, so just to give you some hints as to where it may be heading.
Okay,
There is a water contamination
Yeah,
policy.
okay.
There is let's see, what was
it
it?
just,
And
yeah,
there's
There's
water.
also the climate policy. Like there's some actions
it
that
just
will
doesn't
fit.
seem to fit.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
here.
Within planning, we are exploring and identifying data sources to understand water value, use, and especially to increase the effectiveness of our priority water source. We are going to support community efforts to identify and evaluate the economic and technical feasibility of water supply approaches, best practices that increase water conservation, enhance groundwater recharge, and make the best use of groundwater, surface water, reclaimed water, and stormwater.
Like they're like, we got it.
What are our, like, local partners, what do they say about our priority waters list? Do they find it valuable, or are they just doing their own whatever's closest to them?
So as of now, we haven't had a lot of, I mean, we did engagement about the project itself. So
Right.
Emily did get some feedback. From a planning perspective, this is the first time we're gonna be incorporating that data set and asking our locals to evaluate.
That's what I would like to get some feedback on is, does that really make a difference?
Okay.
Or not to them?
We did, when we made the project, acknowledge that there will still be local priorities in addition to regional priorities. And so that's also what we're hoping they're planning for, is also their local priorities.
And I mean, the
And
Clean Water
so-
Council, I mean, uses the priority waters for funding, et cetera, you know, which are priority waters, why we can help get grants to clean up priority waters, so
Okay, so that gives them a leg up on getting state funding, is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah, it does.
I don't remember seeing that list,
I can,
It was before you.
yeah, we can,
I'd like to see it.
Yeah, we
You
can
know,
send you the website
I
in
mean,
the
so
notes.
is it all one grouping, or is it a ranking of?
Emily and her team evaluated a handful, so I won't be sly, 6, 8.
They're nearly there.
Yeah, well, it's part of that. And so, but it was thinking about different water uses and how people use water differently, whether it's for fishing and recreation, for, we're testing my memory here, spiritual and stillness, aesthetics, like there are different asset or facets of water valuing. They looked at that and then went to our GIS, statewide GIS data sets to try and see which data would best represent how those values are. And they did an overlay. They ended up weighting different priorities. The website explains this way better than I will, so I'll make sure we get you that link.
So basically, the word effectiveness is kind of how to, once you have that data, then what to do with it, so.
Right,
the
and
effectiveness of
the other part that was acknowledged in the priority waters list is that we weren't able, like sometimes we just didn't have the right data to match with how people value water.
Yeah.
And so maybe
Value.
it's having our conversation within the water researchers within the region to help develop those data sets or get a better understanding of how we connect spatial data. The other part was thinking about the spiritual and cultural significance. That is one area that was not incorporated, acknowledged that it should be, but we also didn't know how at that time. So we need to engage with communities to think about how to do that part of the project.
Well, and I think that's interesting because, yeah, I know, over at Lake on the Isles and Cedar Lake and whatever, the park board wanted to put a boardwalk like pretty much all around Cedar Lake, and they were like, could we just not have, construction? Could we leave part of Lake of the Isles alone and have you have Calhoun, you have that, you have Mansfield, Cedar Lake, you got the, anyway, that's, could we just have a difference? And they brought the park board in and just, number one, I was helping, my niece who was running it, but it was just like, you needed a permit to put a boardwalk on, and, but, so yeah, they pulled back, but it was, again, the value, people valued not having construction, can you just go and reflect at part of the lake in Minneapolis somewhere?
Yeah.
So I think keeping the increase of value of water.
I just want to make sure, just from the providing standpoint, we also were thinking about that council staff will create data products, visualizations, databases of narratives and water values regarding regional waters. So thinking about all of those different facets, like I had mentioned. And then thinking about how we can work that into our policy planning and operational role. So that is one thing that we are committing to.
I mean, I think that, it's great to have all the databases and everything, but having them put out in visualization and charts and pictures.
Yeah.
Right.
To, excellent, to communicate out and say it's back up over here. If you want to go sort through it, of course I would go sort through it all, but other people are not. And so how do you get, and that's an art and science in itself.
And you bring together all of those various data sources,
Right.
because there's so many different groups that are.
Okay, on to climate.
All right, climate adaptation and mitigation policy. We tried to do this in one policy, so we'll see if we learn. The risks and associated impacts of climate on water resources, utilities, and infrastructure are proactively addressed, supporting the region's mitigation and adaptation actions to climate-related impacts in the ever-evolving climate future. So we are trying to take risks into consideration and identifying what impacts will happen to our water systems with this policy. The desired outcomes from this policy is that the council and local actions mirror and are in alignment with the state climate action framework. The region is prepared for impacts and is prepared for impacts and associated risks due to climate change and has the tools and resources to adapt and thrive. Negative climate impacts on water sources and water infrastructure are reduced and limited, while positive climate impacts are enhanced and promoted. Water utilities will reduce and mitigate greenhouse gas emissions produced in the collection and treatment of water supply and water treatment through energy efficiency improvements. So that's where we stand at the beginning of thinking about adaptation and mitigation through water and climate connections.
Yeah, no, just look at our climate now. Oof.
It's supposed to snow this weekend.
I mean, yeah, just this winter, I mean, it's an extremely warm winter. So, I mean, we've already felt that impact. So going forward, the more flexibility we build into our systems, the better chance we're gonna have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And so that's what we have to be careful of when we're creating policy and like this. That flexibility has to be in there.
Yeah, when we would have these conversations with our local partners, they would say like the strain right now is that we need to plan for the extremes. And very rarely does the pendulum ever stop in the middle.
Right.
And so we are going from drought, this is now the third year of drought. And when I first got here, we had 7 years of rain in the first 5 years I lived here. So we got 2 extra years of rain, and I thought, I knew Minnesota was wet, but I didn't know it was this wet. And so it's those extremes that we're starting to experience. And if you're trying to build water infrastructure to make sure it can withstand elevated water tables and yet make sure that it also is not going to experience any sort of damage due to drought conditions.
Yeah,
We need to do
because
that.
it's not
On a
necessarily
city
gonna be a
budget.
straight line.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're gonna have swings.
Yep.
Whereas you have the warming and then all of a sudden it's gonna.
Yep.
You're gonna have a really cold winter.
I will say, and this is again, like, kudos to our 4 parents. Like this regional approach really does help build that network and ability for our water practitioners to lean on each other, because if this would have been in a more individualistic governance structure, we wouldn't always have those networks to help hear from our partners or our regional stakeholders. And I think this has been one way where I've been very happy with the framework we've already had established, because we're used to working together already.
And pulling the stormwater out of the wastewater and starting in the 60s and 70s. Nobody was doing,
Geniuses.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have mixed feelings about the greenhouse gas emissions
Okay.
stuff. Because really, there is no local benefit to greenhouse gas emissions reductions. I mean, you look at the whole world, and if China and India are building coal plants everywhere, obviously we need to be energy efficient, but pretending like we're gonna change the climate by being energy efficient, to me, it seems like we're just trying too hard.
Well, and I think the other part, which we don't say here, but now I'm learning these words, is like also thinking about greenhouse gas and co-pollutant reduction. Because if we are going to be, let's say, switching off of natural gas or coal, this would be an easier thing. If we're switching from coal to natural gas, like we won't have as much of the particulates in the air. And so like I think there's some co-pollutants that also help when we are thinking about what our energy sources are. If we're switching to that, there could be localized health benefits from that, but we don't talk about that in this right now. I'm curious if you think that's worth discussing.
Air quality.
Yeah. It seems kind of tangential.
Okay.
I mean, dealing with the ups and downs of the weather, absolutely we have to do that. I mean, I've lived here almost my whole life, and the joke is if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, it'll change. We've been good at that with some things, like having regional parks along the rivers, so when they flood, you're flooding a park rather than people's houses, But just in the, it just sometimes feels like we're trying too hard, but to throw everything but the kitchen sink at there and maybe just focus on the things
Oh, I
that
mean,
we.
does this maybe cover it?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then
So
there's
This is
mitigation
sort of
too.
duplicative of this.
Yeah,
So, you know, and so that Minnesota Climate Action Framework talks about energy
All of those
efficiency,
sorts of things,
mitigating
yeah,
greenhouse
so I don't
gases.
know, this just seems redundant.
okay, thank you for that info. If we do jump down to the actions, so we are prioritizing interagency collaboration to understand the effectiveness of reuse and infiltration as a stormwater management practice, particularly under a range of climate futures. We will connect, partner, and learn from other water utilities and planning organizations as we take on water and climate challenges. And the region will partner with and support academic institutions and other organizations to conduct research to generate metro area specific climate change information, identify potential risks and benefits, and best understand future climate scenarios based on the current science and models. Reuse will come up again later today, so I do want to say this is one of those actions that does some multiple benefits, double service to different policies.
So for so a lot of the actions and the outcomes. So a lot of the things we've heard about looking at reusing the heat generation at the Metro plant. I mean, that's an outcome that falls under this climate action framework. So a lot of those specific outcomes are up here, and the action to get there is to partnering to learn more about that and planning. So maybe, because I mean, this is a case where, you know, a capital action plan for thinking about moving into the heat reuse at the Metro plant, you know, return on investment may be fairly short, but it may be 20-year adaptation, a really good thing. So we have to keep that in mind, the forefront, to bring those things up to the policy, to the council, and keep bringing them up.
Yeah, and I think the first bullet here for this specific example,
Mhm.
but I'm sure that there's some more wiggle room that we should be thinking about. But this one, like integrating and centering state and regional climate objectives into our wastewater operations and planning within the region, like, because we were thinking about climate
Mhm.
within our wastewater operations, that's where the project fit in.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah.
Well, and we're always optimizing our operations, we're gonna do that regardless of,
Regardless, yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're just trying too hard to fit things into a policy.
No, but
Yeah.
some of these, but if we're talking, you know, the 2050 plan and, like you say, short-term, long-term, it is that vision of how do you know, stop pushing a ball uphill, but kind of leap over it and try to say, we're just, this is gonna work and we're gonna find a way and invest. And
Yeah, there's some future thinking that even as a planning agency, I know that we struggle as how to engage with it, because we really try to manage the public's finances as
Right.
best we can.
Yep.
And at the same time, we know that perhaps, well, so we mean, I know, I won't say we, that sometimes the more expensive investment might make more sense in the future long run, and how do we do that cost benefit analysis? So we just need to think about different ways of looking at these problems, because future climate, whatever that might be, puts us in a bind because we don't know what it might be, so we can't plan for it. Just letting you take a little bit more time. Okay. So we are also considering climate vulnerabilities and risks within our own facilities and operations to reduce the impact of climate. So when we do say facilities and operations, oh sorry, there's an and, not a two, thank you. within our facilities and operations, and also reduce the impact of climate on water resources, land management, water planning, and regional water, wastewater services now and into the future. We will be working on developing internal infrastructure design and placement guidelines based on the latest scientific engineering knowledge to reduce their climate risk on longevity. And we already have some of these guidelines in place. We just wanted to make sure that we are revisiting them as we know climate is changing. The council will support low impact design and the integration of nature-based solutions into regional development to adapt to projected climate impacts on our land and waters. And then lastly, this is where I think this also comes back to designing and planning for resilient stormwater infrastructure at council facilities, but we could say to help locals also do this, to mitigate the risk of localized flooding impacts. And then lastly, we are, for the services we provide, it's managing our facilities and land holdings to try to reduce impervious surfaces, integrate more green infrastructure and nature-based solutions within our stormwater management system, install native plantings where possible, and be a regional leader in climate-focused land management.
So this regional leader in climate, so my question was, we're gonna learn all of this, so how do we share it all with everybody else?
Thank you.
So it looks like there's a whole bunch of information also gathered, so.
We need to
Could
convey
be.
that.
Right. I mean, if it's conveyed someplace else, that's fine, but,
Well, we're not the only people that are gathering information.
Right.
either.
so it is kind of this, right, but some of the stormwater stuff on our own thing, I don't know, I mean, it could be someplace else. And it could be in one of our top goals or something, or someplace else that this maybe is an overriding.
Yeah.
Provide,
I think, I
you
mean,
know,
I definitely take joy and responsibility of being part of that bigger water community. And so,
Right.
yes, there's an obligation to share what we know so that we can all help each other do this a little bit better.
well, and maybe is there a place to actually say that?
This was recorded, so I'll make sure
Okay,
we'll
but
put it somewhere.
exactly, but that we will be part of the larger water community.
Yeah. There's gonna be a section,
So-
and actually was walking through this with my authoring team to make sure that what I was thinking was right. But when we are defining roles of the various water players, like, yes, we're identified with each agency or level of government can bring to the table. But it's really, this is where I'll be really dorky and a child of the 80s, but like Captain Planet, like with our powers combined, it's really,
I agree, I think, no, that's, and we'll get you a cape, and we'll
Yeah.
get you a sash and a
Absolutely.
badge, and
Judy, you
a
heard
bracelet.
that right there. All right, cool. I'm gonna get a cape. The next policy, and this one I'm going to acknowledge we need to work with our partners in CD to make sure we
Yeah.
are supporting each other's language when we are thinking about water and land use. So we are giving you our best cut, knowing that we still have to compare notes with them and check in with them on this. So when we are thinking about our water and land use policy, we state, as the region grows, the effects of development, redevelopment, and land use change on water quality, quantity, public utility service, and private water systems are planned for and inform water management approaches and strategies. So as we're developing and putting growth within the region, we are thinking about water systems as we are making these land use changes.
Well, and I think at your Northeast meeting you had before too, like, one of your slides was, you know, all impacts on land, impact water. I mean, that was very direct and very short, so, I mean, I'm not even sure you need the word as the region grows. I mean, like the effects of development, redevelopment, you know, and what happens on land is gonna affect water somehow. Whether we can tighten that up or something, or maybe that's a desired outcome, is to educate people as well, to let them know that. Anyway, but
That's
that,
good, because it
you
seems
had
like
some
we've
very-
already lost one outcome, and rightfully so. Seems as though Councilmember Wolf is moving the first one, which is our industrial waste pollution prevention section of the Met Council will partner with industry and is authorized to set and review permit limits. That is indeed an action we are committing to, not an outcome.
right,
And also, we have a suggestion that the Met Council partners with other state agencies in determination of review of state water plans, permits, regulatory limits, through convening assistance and technical services. That is indeed a partner action, so we can move those, which leaves us with the desired outcome.
Well, the desired outcome is that,
The desired outcome is that one that's left is pretty well-rounded. I
Okay.
think it's not bad to have that as, you know,
Just-
you don't need multiple outcomes
Okay.
necessarily.
well, except I think another outcome is the fact that it's recognized. And I guess it's, I mean, the outcome is kind of part of this, is that it's recognized that when you're development on land, that people understand that it's a shared vision, value, that land is interconnected to water. And what
Yeah.
happens on water could affect land, what's gonna happen on land is gonna affect water.
And water does not acknowledge geographic
Right,
boundaries.
and so the desired I mean, so that's maybe
I think,
somehow that will
Talk
know.
about the interrelationship.
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's good. I also think the part we need to acknowledge in these outcomes is that, like, there are trade-offs that we do make when we're deciding at the regional level and at the local level as to how land use is decided. And while yes, I would personally put my desires on saying let's prioritize water first, when you are in a community conversation, water can't always be the first priority, but it should be considered
right,
and evaluate, like, there should just be clear intention on those trade-offs. It is okay to say, you know, this is the parcel of land that we really do need for industrial development because we need to bring these jobs and this
Right.
income to our community. It's just saying that, like, we should just double check to make sure that this might
right.
not impact water resources. And so, like, it's having that conversation of
I mean,
trade-offs.
you know, to go back to that huge discussion on the Hiawatha Golf Course, I mean, there's water and that balance between managing that water and that swamp, as you so eloquently said, a swamp is a swamp is a swamp, no matter what you do to it.
It always wants to go
It's
back to
going to
being
go
a
back
swamp.
to being a swamp, and so understanding that, but yet wanting a really good outcome to represent the history of what's been there. And that, I think there was an example where everything was really well discussed and is best understood. And I think you did a great job in explaining that as well. So it's a desired outcome is to get people to understand that.
Yeah, thank you.
I think at some point along that line, incorporate the balance, because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the proper balance. So the proper balance is not the balance that we think should be there, but that the collective thinks should be there. So we're looking for the collective balance.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Shifting down, there are a lot of words
I know.
in the
Yeah.
action section, so starting to get them blurred together, I have been.
Well, yeah, you're gonna have to have decreasing returns the more of these we do in one meeting, I think.
Well,
Yeah.
this.
This was the first attempt to like see just how many we
No,
get.
no,
Yeah,
it's
thanks.
Yeah.
But this also has more bullets, so maybe we've got maybe some combinations to do here or something.
Yeah. We'll see how well I can read aloud and read. The first one is pretty important, so we are identifying that state, tribal, local, and watershed planners and water utility staff need to come together to build a shared understanding and identify strategies that address risks to public and ecosystem health. So if we all are going to be planning for our waters together, we probably should have shared understanding of what that means. We're gonna support preservation of regionally significant ecological areas as rural areas develop through engaging stakeholders and technical assistance, outreach to local governments, and plan review. We will support agricultural certification programs and soil health.
Stop at this one
Yep.
for a second.
Yes.
Ultimately, if you're going to protect something, somebody has to buy it.
Okay.
Generally,
Yep, that makes sense.
depending on what it is you're trying to protect. I mean, water bodies, you could kind of draw a circle around them. But other ecologically important areas, it either has to become a park or a conservation area or something, and somebody has to buy it
Mhm.
if you're gonna tell people they can't use it. as their own private
Yeah.
land. And so I don't know, you know, is there more to that we need, I don't know how to get at that.
I have a few thoughts on this, and I think this would be a good one to talk with CD on. Because communities have green space requirements, and if we can incorporate the practices to preserve within the green space requirements,
Yeah.
within their portion of the plan, then maybe that's a good way for us to address it.
And, yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
communities have like greenway corridors and whatnot to, so that when they get their park dedication, they make sure they hit those areas
Yeah.
that they wanna save, or have a payment scale for different levels of quality, you know, what they will pay for it and stuff, but that's the big challenge, and people say, oh, you gotta preserve everything, it's like, well, you can't just take it,
Right.
you know?
If you color it in
Those-
black on the
those-
map,
those-
it falls off.
That person has the same right to use their
Yeah.
land as you did when you built your house.
Yeah.
People forget that once they're on the house, it's like, oh, you're gonna take my view? You don't own your view.
There's one slightly related item that I just made a note to myself about. Are you guys familiar with Highland Bridge and the development
Oh,
there?
yeah.
Yeah.
Where they daylit a creek that was
Yeah.
buried in a pipe.
Mhm.
We don't really have anything to the extent of redevelopment and opening opportunities
Ah,
for connections to water.
And
I
that
think
should
that would
probably
be
be
a
a
That
good
should
good
probably
thing to
be-
have in there, yeah.
yeah, no, you
Yeah, where possible, undo the harms of the past.
Yeah.
Well, actually, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I grew up in Randall, so,
I'm like
well, from
a quarter mile from us.
Great place. We are still staying at agricultural for the next bullet point, so support the certification programs in soil health and regenerative agriculture in rural areas through council monitored agricultural preserves program and partnership with the Minnesota Department of Ag, Metro Soils and Water Conservation Districts.
That's really long and very specific.
That's good feedback, thank you very much. When I had to like take 2 breaths while trying to say it,
I
it's
know.
probably too much. On that same line, work with communities, watershed, agricultural landowners and businesses, agency partners to identify, promote, and assess best management practices, including the timing, rate, placement of source fertilizer, herbicides, pesticides, application, healthy soil practices, vegetated buffers to provide vegetated land areas between pollutant sources and surface water bodies to protect groundwater. I am curious to hear your thoughts about our role in this and potentially some of our sister agencies.
isn't this mostly Department of Health and DNR?
Well, there's some
Wildlife
DNR, there's some
protection.
Department of Agriculture, it's a whole mess of.
It's kind of like,
So this is the part that, again, we're still in the middle of really parsing these
but
things
it
out.
also, you know, protecting groundwater, again, it's private wells as well, so it's,
That's
and
where,
this
yeah.
this whole thing, it may take some rethink. This is, we have to go to our caves.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, just turn off the lights right now.
No, it's good.
I mean, I think, you know, preserving agricultural land is good. Best practices are good. Do we need to be in that much detail? Maybe
Right.
not.
Okay, yeah. We will identify needs and develop tools to help improve public understanding around contamination, well testing, maintenance, source water protection, and publicly available resources.
I just lost where you were at. Okay.
We will support communities and watersheds in their application of regional treatment of stormwater to reduce design and maintenance costs, okay, while increasing the utilization of developable land.
No,
No, that was actually right.
Okay, reduce design, okay, and maintenance.
design and
costs.
maintenance is,
Yeah, it's
Okay.
together. So the top one, just to, that is thinking about the private well testing so
Yep.
that we can start sharing resources and
Yep.
getting folks connected. The last one is thinking about stormwater design and
Yep.
maintenance costs.
Yep.
Thinking about developing that. All right, gonna go. I'm gonna go to the next one in plan. We are going to, I don't know why there is a comma, so we're going to ensure the protection and restoration of natural, source, and recreational waters, as well as the sustainability of water utility systems. I apologize, this is not proper English. The gist of this one is that
No, I know, it's just,
we are going to make sure that we are thinking about protection and restoration of waters, thinking about the sustainability of utility systems while we think about our planning role. And so again, this is opportunities of connecting and wellhead protection, groundwater plans, and environmental
And
impact.
to some degree, that's what we're already doing here under
Yeah.
the partner thing,
Yeah.
so.
well, and then,
Well, it's committing that as we're doing our review of these plans.
and just in general, ensuring should
Yeah.
not be included. You're making.
As soon as I said it, I knew I was gonna
You
hear
never,
that.
you were gonna hear that from me.
Yep.
I have many lawyers tell me you can't use that word.
That one can be broken into two statements, I think, is why it reads funny.
Yeah,
We're going to identify the latest research to improve and update stormwater infiltration requirements and recommendations around practices, particularly in vulnerable drinking water supply management areas, to make sure that we are not infiltrating waters that could impact our water supply.
so if you're using the latest research, you've already identified it. So here's, I think, where there's lots of extra words, possibly.
Okay.
So just, I mean, I'm just thinking that if you're using it, you've implicitly identified it.
We'll just start with use. We're
Well, we're reducing design and maintenance costs, and we're
Improving,
improving the infiltration requirements. I mean,
there's something, there's
Yeah,
two things there, yeah.
there's, those two are together somehow, but really they're not together.
And then lastly, we're going to evaluate how growth and development, urban and rural land uses, and overall land use change impact and influence water supplies and local water needs, which is somewhat of the policy itself.
so urban and rural, that will automatically include agricultural. So that's just,
everything.
I know, so just when they have their, land use maps, they have it broken out. Sometimes it's semi-rural, but then they have agricultural, so it's.
Yeah. What we will be providing, we will implement and promote the use of nature-based green infrastructure solutions on Met Council property. We will analyze the impact of land practices on water quality, quantity, including the vulnerability of source water areas and water supplies. We will provide resources and tools to promote land use practices and development decisions that enhance water quality for communities and watersheds across the region. So we'll be providing tools and resources. We will identify and develop tools and resources to better understand the pressures. These are the same thing.
Resources and tools and
Yeah.
tools and
Well,
resources.
I was gonna say, this one, the only difference is that we do say utility staff, but there is something there.
Yes,
Combining
that's-
those two.
That's,
And then lastly, we will
If you put them
offer,
in the opposite order, then they're two different things, right?
exactly. We will offer grants and other funding opportunities that help to protect and enhance water quality, quantity, and other water benefits throughout the region.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
We have gotten them to the last one.
no,
Wearing
this,
it
this,
down.
I was
No,
gonna say,
no,
or
no,
this
this-
is the last one.
this had a
it's
lot
up
of-
to you.
similar, and then when you have kind of run-ons, you have to kind of
This is
reset.
our
This
youngest
one is
policy
exciting.
that has not had as much policy. polishing.
Oh, thank goodness, here, see, water reuse,
And this one's fun, see, playing
I was getting it on the other ones. There was just so many bullets, I had to step back.
That is fair. Water reuse, our policy on water reuse. The council will work with our partners to identify issues and challenges for the region as we work together to reduce barriers to water reuse while balancing public health and financial concerns. Additionally, the council will explore and implement, when feasible, the use of water conservation practices such as wastewater and stormwater reuse and low-impact development practices to promote a more sustainable region. Our desired outcomes is that stormwater reuse guidelines for the state and region exist, that they are there, that balance the needs of implementers, state agencies, public health, and financial costs while furthering sustainable waters. Wastewater reuse is implemented where it is economically feasible and appropriate. And the council will pursue water reclamation projects within its own operations and supports our partners in their water reclamation efforts through financial and technical support. So there will be guidelines to help folks implement. We will try to promote wastewater reuse where feasible. And we will be working on doing wastewater reuse internally in our own operations and support others who want to use wastewater reuse.
This has too many words, but I don't feel like figuring out which words don't need to be there.
That's okay. It's still a good comment.
Let me write it.
Yeah, please.
So I'm just reading through here in general, and the first thing that sticks out to me, and I'm just, you can point to say, well, here it is. But there's gotta be research done on the feasibility of water reuse in the metro area.
Okay.
So, and whether that's we providing funds for that, or we're partnering with the University of Minnesota with that, or something. But, you know, we're not Tucson, it's just got 50 feet of sand, it's localized, it's, you know, most of Lake Elmo, you can't recharge. I mean, I was decluttering my house the other day, throwing out gobs of technical, and I had a 1961 report from MIT, which I kept on the mathematics of water infiltration. So, I mean, because that's what my thesis was on. But anyway, so, but there still is so much research on the feasibility, and so can we be a part of that?
Well, and there's some that's already going on.
It
Like
is.
the Shakopee Midwakaton Sioux is reusing stormwater.
Hugo is, so how do we?
Yeah.
So how do we take and take success stories and share and
Yeah.
and do that? But so that was I just want to make sure it's in there someplace, and if it's there, but it was just on the top of my head.
SMSC is both reusing stormwater, but they're also reusing wastewater, putting it through the membrane system to get it really, really clean, and then putting it in ponds and using it to water the golf course.
They're using it
and-
for irrigation,
Yeah.
They did do a study to evaluate recharging aquifers, and they decided against that.
But they've been reusing wastewater in California since the 60s. So I mean, just yeah. So the rest of it, we're behind.
Well, we don't have the scarcity to make it cost effective most of the time to do the sorts of things that they're doing in other
So we
places.
have to get started.
So in order to get started, we are proposing some actions, trying to do some sections. We're gonna collaborate with others to determine the direction and whether further guidance and or regulation is needed. That actually is currently happening right now.
Yes, it is.
So myself and some staff are sitting on those conversations. Ideally, we will have guidance to help locals implement. The next bullet is that council staff will work with agency partners to better define agency roles and responsibilities. Again, we need guidance, and then we also need to see how we all are gonna show up to help support this guidance. We will promote and invest stormwater and wastewater reuse as viable alternatives to augment non-potable water uses to support regional growth when economically feasible.
Which we're already doing.
We're already doing. We're just committing to continue to do it. The council will continue to work with partners to identify external opportunities for reuse for treated wastewater and assist in the evaluation of this opportunity as a regional alternative to conserve potable water sources. So again, we already have this, some of this language is carrying forward
That's good.
from the 2040 plan so that we're consistent with our water reuse policy.
And from the work that we did with Rosemont.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the Clean
Absolutely.
Water Council has a whole water reuse policy thing too.
Yeah.
So now it's, we're gonna be talking about it.
Within the planning section, the council will identify and plan for long-range regional investments in wastewater and stormwater reuse that protect water quality and quantity. So now we're not just partnering, we're planning for it. The council will identify viable criteria for viable wastewater reuse projects, including but not limiting to reducing effluent contamination concentrations to match the water quality need associated with the intended reuse. So one concern is that Sometimes our effluent quality will preclude it from being reused, and so we can work with others to investigate what that means. Reuse treated wastewater to meet non-potable water needs within our treatment facilities where economically feasible. So instead of pulling stuff out of the ground, let's reuse our effluent. And the council shall pursue sources of non-council funding to complement council funding of wastewater reuse projects, including Clean Water Legacy Funds, state bond funds, reuse grants. So we'll be looking for funding. We will provide by implementing stormwater and wastewater reuse at our facilities, including for the purposes of demonstration. This part I think we can just drop out because we are going to be following
Right.
rules,
Yeah.
so I'll just not
Yeah,
read that aloud.
yeah.
But, and the council will continue to support our partners as they pursue water reuse projects through financial and implementation support. So technical support and also, when possible, financial support.
No, this is the only one where we said we were gonna look for money.
So far,
But I mean, do we need to say that?
it depends. So this is where we need to discuss, this is where the conflicting language, not conflicting, it's just the language that dictates how we can use our wastewater fees. If we are doing a wastewater reuse project, that is connected with our system, but if we are thinking about doing stormwater reuse, and this actually just says wastewater, doesn't it? Yeah, okay, I'm gonna stop talking and say that, I'm gonna look into that. So I was thinking that because if it was a stormwater reuse project, we potentially couldn't use wastewater fees to do it.
But we look for non-council funding for everything, and we don't necessarily put it in a policy in order to do that, is what I'm saying.
Okay, that's,
I don't know if we need that in.
okay, thank you, yeah, no, that's a good comment. All
I
right,
didn't totally lose my mind, you mean the beginning.
Well, I need to get a copy.
Not totally.
So I can get my feedback.
So they're in the,
thank you have made it to the end. I usually do plus deltas
I
at my
think it's
meeting,
good, but
so I'm curious, is 5 too
I
many?
feel like for me, I'm kind of skimming,
3 or 4.
because I have to.
That sounds good. We will adjust, we wanted to be ambitious, yes.
Is it possible that you could send me a copy of this so I could really give my full input? Because I was kind of skimming
They're
today.
in here.
Yeah, we'll send you a version of this.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yep, we will get this for you.
You might have to send it in the meeting notes so that we're not just sending it individually, just to make sure it's like somewhere where it's all accessible, but also to send you the link to that Priority Waters.
Yeah.
There's.
And I would prefer if I'm coming to a meeting like this, that I could have something like this in advance. And that way,
It was part of the packet.
okay.
Where did Nika go? Did she just leave?
I don't know.
She
it was
was
one of
been gone
the,
for
it
a while,
was
so
one
I
of
guess.
the packets when they say, here's the stuff for the environmental meeting.
Yeah,
And it was, if you
So-
opened up the agenda, it
Yeah, I
popped
think
up.
so that
It's
was my fault.
important.
So,
if we're gonna talk about these policies, have each policy bulleted under there in the agenda separately.
Okay, I'll work with her on that. I
Yeah.
did send, what topics we were going to be discussing, so.
Right.
But we can make sure we get it on the
But
agenda.
make it really, really obvious for
Yep.
stupid people, this is what we're going to ask you about.
That's stupid.
well, for me, everything, I do everything in advance.
Okay,
And so I'm not an in the moment person.
that
When I
is,
do things in the moment, you get 10% of what I would give you if I'm able to do it in advance.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that. No, we will continue to work out a system to
Yeah.
make this work for all of us, because, I want more than just 10% of your ideas.
Well, like
I'm just being honest.
I said, we had this big, long thing that had them all in there, but when they're all running together like that, it starts to go wah, wah, wah.
It looks like that last page.
As opposed to like
I wish I
this,
didn't-
it's like this, all, these
I didn't
all
pick that up.
separated.
I
but
definitely
then-
would.
Yeah, it's
Good.
easier to
Do
review them
you,
separately.
do you find that the narrative above the table is, because that's why I
I
have been sending this.
read the narratives,
Okay.
but just that it was all
But to
in
have
one
page,
big
but to have
long
page breaks,
thing.
here's the water policy,
Yeah,
We can make this better.
right, it's just,
yeah.
Okay.
I'm into page breaks, topics.
Okay.
And then I could print out just those 2 pages if I really need to print something out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds good. We'll We will keep on making
I
this
know,
better.
aren't we picky council people?
We,
I
we have 2 more planned
But-
sessions,
but-
which means we get to improve only on the next one, because hopefully we'll be done after that,
But
so.
we're not being picky for ourselves, we're being picky for the people we represent.
And the region appreciates your pickiness.
That's,
Well, and these need to be sent out to the people who weren't here.
Yeah.
And say, you know, just because you didn't show up for the meeting doesn't mean you don't, that you get out of reviewing the
right.
stuff.
Yeah, I was hoping to get some comments from last time, it was just 1, so I can make them do 6 at the same time,
Right.
so it's a good thing you guys showed.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, we are hoping to get everyone's feedback, even if they don't come to the meeting,
Yeah,
so,
that's important.
because we only have 7 members.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get some more perspectives.
And we will be presenting this to the committee of the whole in April, not the same format, but we'll be going through these.
Okay.
as well.
Good.
And so that will help when you present it to the committee of the whole, how to send it out to people as well.
Yeah.
And to give a little, sometimes it's nice to say, you know, we're attaching this, but then give a little descriptor. Each policy is its own, with the bullets and the narrative, so
Yeah.
they're standalone and just, you know, let them know it's easier to pop out and stuff like that.
Yeah, thank you for that input.
Um,
We'll make it easy.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
And with there being no further business to come before this committee, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Jen.